I never thought I would speak of this. Not out loud, and certainly not to anyone who wasn't there. But now I am old, and I realize that silence has a weight, a shape, a shadow. It follows you into the kitchen, into bed, into dreams, and it shapes the lives of those who come after you, whether they know it or not. My name is Helen Grace Holloway. I was born in 1952 in a small house at the edge of a quiet road in Tennessee. There was a willow tree in the backyard and a long wooden fence that creaked when the wind passed through. People always say the past is a different country, and they're right. In that country, girls like me didn't speak unless spoken to. Mothers taught you how to fold laundry before they ever taught you about your own body. And men, well, men had the final word, even when that word was silence. I was the third of 5 daughters. My father was a factory man, proud and hard, with hands that smelled of grease and tobacco. My mother was quieter. Her world was church, and the kitchen, and her roses out front. She would brush our hair in silence and hum hymns that I still hear when I close my eyes. I've carried this story like a photograph hidden in a Bible, pressed flat, untouched, but always there. It's not an easy one to tell, but I'm telling it now because I want my granddaughter to know that bravery doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like surviving. I was 12 when things began to change, or maybe they had always been wrong, and I just didn't know how to name it yet. It started with the eyes, a certain look, a certain stillness in the room when I entered. It was my uncle, not by blood. He had married my mother's sister, but he came around often after her death. He was charming, with a voice that made people laugh at church picnics, and shoes that never had a speck of dust on them. I remember the first time he gave me a doll from town. "Because you're the prettiest niece I have," he said, smiling. I didn't want to take it. I felt something strange, like a knot in my stomach, but I smiled anyway. That's what girls were taught to do, smile. That summer, he started visiting more. Mama would cook an extra plate without asking why. Daddy didn't question him either. Maybe he was grateful to have another man around to talk to. Maybe he didn't see, or maybe he chose not to. I remember a night, late July, when the cicadas were so loud I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen for water, barefoot and half asleep, and there he was, sitting in the dark. "Can't sleep, sweetheart." I said nothing, just nodded. He stepped closer. "You're growing up so fast, like your mama." That was the first time he touched my shoulder. Just a hand, just a squeeze. But it lingered. I froze, and the shadow moved closer. After that night in the kitchen, I began to dread his visits. But they didn't stop. In fact, they became more frequent. He'd show up with pies from town, or tools for Daddy, or just a howdy for Mama. And no one ever questioned why a grown man would want to spend so much time with a family full of girls. I started to avoid him, hiding behind the barn or helping Mama hang laundry longer than I needed to. But no matter where I went, I always felt his eyes following me, like wind pushing against a door you're trying to close. One day he found me out by the well. I was drawing water, sweating from the summer heat, and my braid stuck to my back. He came up behind me and placed his hand on my waist. "You sure are turning into a lady," he said, low. I flinched. He laughed. That night I cried into my pillow so quietly, I gave myself a headache. I tried to tell Mama once. I remember it vividly. We were shelling peas on the porch, our aprons full and our hands moving on instinct. I said, "Mama, I don't like Uncle Tom. He gives me a bad feeling." She stopped for a second. Just 1 second. "Don't be silly, Helen," she said too quickly. "He's family." And just like that, the silence fell between us again. Thicker this time. Heavier. I began to change. I stopped laughing. I avoided mirrors. I flinched when Daddy raised his voice, even if it wasn't at me. My sisters noticed. My oldest, Mary, once said, "You're getting weird, Helen. You used to be fun." I just nodded. No one knew. Or maybe they did. There's a kind of knowing that lives in the corners of eyes, in the pauses between sentences. I saw it in Mama when he kissed my forehead too long. I saw it in Daddy when I left the room quickly, and he didn't ask why. By the time I was 15, I'd learned to live inside my own silence. I built walls with my chores, with my Bible, with my long walks in the woods behind the house. One evening I stayed out longer than usual. I sat by the creek where the water ran cold and fast, letting it numb my bare feet. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Please, please let me disappear." But prayers like that don't get answered the way we think. The next week I was sent to stay with my aunt in Mississippi for the summer. They said it was to help her with the new baby. But I knew it was to get me out of the house, to reset things. And maybe it worked. Maybe they thought distance would fix what was broken. But trauma doesn't live in houses. It lives in the body, in the memory, in the way you wake up gasping from a dream you don't fully remember. My aunt's house in Mississippi was small, loud, and full of children. It was nothing like the hollow silence of our home back in Tennessee. There, the morning smelled of cornbread and baby powder, and someone was always crying or laughing or chasing a chicken down the road. It should have been a relief, a chance to breathe. But I carried my old fear with me, like a ribbon tucked inside my dress, always touching my skin. Aunt Clara was kind, in her way. She didn't ask questions. She gave me chores, space, and plenty of company to keep me distracted. I started to smile again, at least on the outside. I helped with the children, sang while folding clothes, and sometimes, when no one was looking, I danced barefoot in the garden. But the nights were still mine, and that's when the memories crept in. I didn't have words for it. Back then, girls weren't taught about trauma or boundaries or healing. You just carried your pain like a second spine, invisible, but always present. One night, Clara found me sitting outside, arms wrapped around my knees, tears running, silent down my cheeks. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just wrapped a shawl around me and said, "You can't outrun the past, baby, but you can walk beside it, if you learn how." I never forgot that. That summer, I met James. He was tall, sweet, and quiet. The kind of boy who listened more than he spoke. He worked at the feed store and always smelled faintly of hay and tobacco. He didn't try to charm me. He just showed up, again and again, with a smile and a kind word and no questions. I liked that. I liked him. We married the following spring. I was 17. He was 22. And for a time, I believed I'd finally left the past behind. We moved into a small house on the edge of town. I grew tomatoes in the backyard. He fixed cars in the shed. We were poor, but we were trying. Our first child, Samuel, was born in the middle of a thunderstorm. I held him and cried, not because of the pain, but because, for the first time in years, I felt something break open in my chest, something soft. But even in the warmth of new motherhood, there were shadows. Sometimes I'd flinch when James walked into the room too quickly. Sometimes I'd wake from nightmares and find myself on the floor, gasping. I told no one, not even him. I just kept going, I raised our children, kept the house, smiled at church. I became Mrs. Holloway, respectable, steady, dependable. And for decades, I stayed that way. I never spoke of what happened, not once, not when Mama died, not even when Uncle Tom passed in a hospital bed, alone and unrepentant. I sat in the back pew at his funeral and said nothing, but silence does strange things with time. It doesn't shrink, it spreads. And one day, my granddaughter asked me a question I couldn't answer without shaking. Her name is Lily, my Lily. Freckles like cinnamon dust, hair always in a ponytail, and a laugh that fills the whole room. She was 15 when she asked me. "Grandma," she said one night as we folded sheets together, "why do you always flinch when someone hugs you from behind?" I froze. She kept folding. I said, "What do you mean?" "It's just, I don't know. You're the warmest person I know, but sometimes it's like your body forgets to be here. Like you go somewhere else for a second." I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, looking out into the dark yard where fireflies danced. The wind felt heavy, and I realized something terrifying. I had spent my entire life surviving, but not living. I had built a family, raised good children, been a loyal wife. But I had never been whole. Not really. And I was passing that silence on. The next morning I sat Lily down. Just her and me. I made us tea, chamomile, her favorite, and held the cup between both hands like it might give me courage. And then I told her. I told her about the willow tree, about the kitchen that night, about the touch I never asked for, and the silence that followed. She didn't cry. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. And when I finished, she stood up and wrapped her arms around me from the front. Slowly, gently, without surprise. "Thank you," she whispered, "for telling me." That night I wrote a letter to my daughter, Lily's mother. I told her the same story, and a week later I told my son. And slowly, over the next months, I began to let go. Not of the memory, that stays, but of the shame, the guilt, the lie that it was ever my fault. I started therapy at 70 years old. My counselor was younger than Lily, but she listened with respect, and she told me, "You were brave to survive. Now you get to be brave again, to heal." I joined a support group. I began to write, pages and pages, not for anyone to read, but because the words had to come out. And one Sunday morning, at church, during the quiet of the opening hymn, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel dirty in God's house. I felt whole. It's been 4 years since I first told Lily what happened to me. I'm 74 now, and I feel more alive than I ever did at 20. The house is quieter these days. My husband passed last year peacefully, holding my hand, never fully knowing the weight I'd carried, but always treating me with gentleness. Sometimes I wish I had told him, but other times I think maybe he knew. In the way he never raised his voice, in the way he never rushed me, in the way he'd pause before touching me, waiting for my eyes to meet his. That, too, was love. My children are grown now, with their own little ones, and I watch them, the way they raise their kids with language I never had. Your body belongs to you. No means no. Tell me if someone makes you uncomfortable. Words I never heard in my own childhood. And when I hear them, I know. The cycle has been broken. Not erased, but broken. I've started writing my story down. Not just the painful parts, but the beautiful ones, too. The smell of fresh cornbread. The way Lily paints her toes different colors every week. The way my grandson holds my hand when we walk to the park. I've titled the journal, Things I Never Said Out Loud. Maybe one day they'll read it. Maybe not. But I want it to be there. Proof that even the most broken voices can sing again. A few months ago, Lily stood up at her school's poetry night and read a piece titled, The Strongest Woman I Know. She didn't say my name. She didn't need to. I cried anyway. And when she came down from the stage, she hugged me tight and whispered, "You saved me, Grandma. You taught me what silence costs." So here I am telling this story to you. Not because I want sympathy, not because I need closure, but because truth matters, even if it comes late, especially then. If you are reading this, or listening, or remembering something you've buried deep, I want you to know this. You are not alone, and your voice still matters. Even now, especially now. Love, Helen.